Hi, folks. Welcome to our webinar on document automation. So to kick it off, let's talk about why is this important? Why are we talking about this now? And I think there's a number of reasons why doc automation is critical for the equipment finance industry. One is efficiency. So to really do deals and be profitable today, you really have to automate documents. And that's especially true for small ticket and micro ticket deals. There's accuracy. Humans make errors. What is the cost of getting a document wrong? The next is think about the borrower and vendor experience. If you've got a borrower and they're ready to sign, get them the documents. The next is regular regulatory compliance. Now, thankfully, we've had some reprieve with 1071, especially for the ELFA members. However, the increasing regulatory pressure from states is getting more complicated to get these documents generated with the right templates, with the right calculations. It's all dynamic is becoming more and more difficult. And then scale. So I've been fortunate to be working in the industry for 20 plus years, and I've worked with hundreds of equipment finance companies. And I can't tell you how many times I've come into operations where you work with, you come in and there's that one operations person who's amazing, but they've got all the knowledge of what document templates to generate under what circumstances from what state based on what product type and equipment is needed. And a lot of times that person's ready to retire. So how do you scale that and how do you de-risk that key person risk? So for all those reasons, we are super excited. We've put together a power panel to talk about this topic. We've got individuals with real world experience implementing doc automation with decades and decades of operational doc experience. We have technologists with fintech experience, with servicing experience, with software experience. And then we've got one of the largest doc automation companies in the world representing the panel as well. So let me introduce the panel. I guess I'll start with myself. My name is Christian Dolan. I'm the CEO and founder here at Nortech. I've been in the industry for about, as I mentioned, 20 years or so. And fortunate to be participating with these others, and I'll be hosting. The next is David Trost. So David is now the director of product here at Nortech. We're very lucky to have David. David's got 10 plus years in equipment finance. He's been a lender. He's been a fintech provider. He's been a servicer, and now he's a software provider. So he really brings a lot of different technical perspectives. We've got Ginger Lemon from a senior partner at DocuSign. Ginger has been at DocuSign for 10 plus years, and she's got decades of working in the software industry in regulated industries. So it's really cool to have Ginger here because she's bringing in expertise in digital agreement management and automation, e-signing security, authentication, fraud, and integrating e-signature solutions into the equipment finance process. And her perspective on the webinar is a broader view of the industry. So I think the rest of the panel, we're all part of the industry. Ginger's able to bring in a really unique outside perspective. We're super excited to have Karis Hahn from Finova Capital. Karis is the head of technology there. He's got 30 plus years of experience in finance, accounting, fintech, and operations. Finova's done some really cool stuff. I mean, they've basically automated the origination process from via APIs and embedded solution, deals coming in all the way through signed documents without a lender touching anything. So Karis is going to be able to share some of his real world experiences, and it's not, and he'll talk about some of those challenges. So Karis will talk about, also leveraging how to leverage APIs, including the DocuSign API, to create that seamless experience. And then last, we got Jamie Haver with us. Jamie is a former bank executive, but now the founder of Happy Manufacturing. Jamie has 30 plus years of experience in the equipment finance industry. Her expertise is operational efficiencies, process optimization, compliance, risk management, and regulatory best practices. So the really cool thing about having Jamie here is she's going to bring it back to a process first approach, right? Like the rest of us technologists want to throw technology at it. Jamie will be like, hold on, it's about getting the process right first, which is great. So thank you all for participating. So let's get started with our content. So to set the stage, a deal's come in, pulled a bunch of data from a different bunch of providers. It's gotten approved either automatically or via a person. Now you're ready to generate docs. What's stopping us from just generating the docs? Like, what's so hard about this? And I'm going to start with Keras. So, Keras, with your embedded solution, you fully automated the doc execution process. Tell us about that process and tell us about some of those initial challenges.
Sure, Christian, and thanks for the introduction, and thanks for the opportunity to participate with the group in the webinar today. Appreciate the opportunity to share some knowledge here. In terms of your question, I think the obvious original challenge is you have to balance the user and customer experience with the need to generate the document in the full level of detail and including all of the data and including all of your approvals, including all of your appropriate signers, et cetera, et cetera. There's a balance between the level of complexity and the level of detail that is required in your individual documents, be it a contract, be it an agreement, be it a delivery and acceptance. Some operational type documents may be a little bit more readily available to generate than a pure agreement or a pure contract. So that's definitely the first overall challenge. We experienced in integrating with a vendor partner who is actually hosting via API webhook all of the data and all of the experience within their own platform. So there's a challenge there where we were seeing some latency and we were seeing some overhead in terms of length of time it was taking to generate a document in that secondary environment.
Hmm.
So you have to balance that with packages that you're utilizing. You may be utilizing merge packages or some other type of packages, but there is going to be overhead that comes with that may impact the delivery of the document to the end user and part of the user experience. In some cases, we were seeing as much as a minute. In some cases, we were only seeing a few seconds of latency, but a few seconds, while it doesn't sound like a lot, is
A lot.
definitely a
Yeah.
concern from a merchant and a user experience perspective, especially when you're interacting with a vendor and you have the vendor's expectations to be able to deliver the information to them quickly enough that they can then deliver it to the user or to the customer. So I would
Right.
say those were the two largest challenges that we ran into. I'm going to save the data part of it because I know we're going to talk about that in a lot more detail later on here in a few minutes. But just to start off with, those are the few large challenges that we saw when you were looking to integrate this overall opportunity.
Fantastic. So, it's interesting you said like you don't have all the data you need. And I guess maybe just from a like an understanding, like why? Like you made the credit decision. Why and you've got the credit app, why don't you have everything you need?
The typical challenge is validating whether the people or person you have on file and are ready to attach to an agreement specifically um, is authorized to sign that agreement. So, making sure that your diligence and you're right that should be all done as part of the credit approval process, your credit workflow to get you to that point that once you're able to generate documents, um, you validated all of that data up front. one of the approaches we took was we were trying to do a fast pre-approval program for selected
Mm,
users that the vendor would send us the data up front, and the vendor would, based on their data set, allow us to calculate pre-approval opportunities that didn't require additional walkthroughs based on processing volumes or based on experiences or based on capacity, based on statements that you've provided and processed. But the challenge there is if you're reliant on vendor data, there still has to be some element of validation associated with your overall process, and you have to make sure that the data they're providing you is current enough.
yeah, yeah. And I think you're right. I think we're going to unpack that in a lot more detail because it does seem like that's a common theme.
Right.
So Jamie, I like one thing, Kara says like get that deal approved, turn around that approval. Like I hear that a lot from our clients, like get the deal off the street. What does that mean and what sort of challenges that does that typically pose to like the operations folks?
I have 99 reasons. So it's funny. I want to touch real fast on the latency of 1 minute to a few seconds, which in a broker shop is like a dream come true, right? Like if a deal is done and docked in 30 minutes, that's awesome, right? Um, but there's when we're relying on whether it be sales or vendors, any information that's coming in, if we're relying on on a person to give us the information, we still have to validate it, right? So you trust, but you verify, and you have to do that every time. You can send out documents and get a deal off the street, but if the person that signs the documents isn't authorized, then you could potentially, deliver equipment and not have an enforceable contract. You'd have to go back and have documents re-signed, which creates reputation risk with the customer and the vendor. They lose trust in your ability to be efficient.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, those are just some of the things, and those verifying who can sign can be done through like a CT Lean or through automation, right? So through
Mhm.
CT Lean or Middesk or LexisNexis, pull in that information without having to wait to hear back from the customer and get additional information. Um, so things like that can help, but
Sure.
that's one of the biggest problems is making sure or verifying the person that's signing is authorized to sign.
Okay. Okay, great. And yeah, you're absolutely right about that trust. Like as soon as you send out those wrong documents, I suppose that causes a lot of distrust.
And internally as well, right? It's double work. People are frustrated. It's not awesome.
Yeah, yeah. So David, like from a technology standpoint, are there any big constraints making the technology work to automate the docs out of the gate?
I think the main one is thinking about doc generation in a silo versus, as Harris mentioned, having it be incorporated overall into your origination process. So doc generation really starts at application with having standardized um, format that you're collecting data in every single time to ensure that you're able to do the validation in different
Mhm.
systems automatically that Jamie touched on. So ultimately, when you go and click a button, um, you're able to generate docs and have it be accurate. I think a big concern when you choose the doc generation provider is what your data model looks like. So, and what I mean by that is when you generate docs, you need your system to be able to point to all the different little data points that you need to actually appear on the document. So you have to be smart in how you build out your loan origination system to make sure that those are all available to whatever API or tool that you're then pushing that data into to go to the contract.
Right. Yeah, I would imagine with equipment finance, there's a lot of nuanced equipment data, a lot of details on the borrower that typically just don't come through on a typical credit app that you need to get to secure that document.
Yeah, definitely. Lots of different little objects related to a lot of different nuances from regulations, equipment, contract types, et cetera.
Okay. So Ginger, so you kind of heard about all our pain here in equipment finance. What are some other automation what are some of the automation risks that lenders need to be aware of, and what do you see outside of the industry?
Yeah. So, when it comes to automation, well, first of all, thank you for inviting DocuSign to participate in this panel. Super excited to be
Of
here.
course, excited to have you.
And yeah, and just listening to Kehirs and David and Jamie, and like listening to the business problems, how Finova has solved for it. DocuSign approaches agreements, right? From the standpoint of like creating the agreement, right? Everything that we've talked about pulling all the data together, pulling the right forms together, who has the ability to sign, right? That's all part of the data creation or the agreement creation process.
Mhm.
And then you have the execution. That's when you commit to that agreement, right? And there's different forms that you can do there within DocuSign. And then post execution of the agreement, like how do you manage those agreements? So DocuSign historically has been known for e-signature, right? And that's that commit piece. And we have a very robust, secure platform on commit. And we've expanded our platform to encompass the entire agreement workflow process. And it's called Intelligent Agreement Management. So it's modular, allowing our customers to address different business needs throughout the entire agreement workflow process. So when you think about, just on the creation side, some of the challenges that our customers and prospects have is, how do you do the data collection piece, right? Making sure that that data is collected appropriately. You're doing data verification and validation before it's even populated into the DocuSign envelope. That helps reduce that NIGO, right? That not in good order. The piece of the identity verification, like who has the ability to sign, who needs to approve the agreement, right? All of that now can be done more upstream in the agreement process. So that can help mitigate fraudulent activities. It can accelerate the pace to get the agreement out for execution, right? And it can minimize downstream impact for somebody signing that shouldn't be signing, right? Or data that's incorrect on the agreement that has to send it back up through the work stream to get it re-signed, or maybe go into underwriting or something like that. So those are that's the different functionality that DocuSign is building into our platform. And one example I have is it's in the wealth management space. You talk about templates, complex agreements, right? This one particular organization had 30 to 50 different types of templates, right? Because same as equipment financing, it depends on what the customer needs to do to execute, right? That particular investment portfolio option. So what they did is they used DocuSign IAM solutions to build their agreement workflow platform, which include like a data capture element, like that was made available through a web form. And then it helped, we have Maestro, which is a workflow process. So based upon how the person or organization answer those questions, that helped dictate like the downstream impact and what documents to pull, right? So that really reduced the time, 70% time saved on that agreement creation process, right? And it
That's
also
huge.
resulted in a 90% reduction in time for execution as well. So I just want to highlight that as things that DocuSign is doing.
No, those are real business benefits. And, I know from like firsthand working directly with your API considerably, it's pretty cool. Like your API is very powerful. And like when you do capture some of those data points, I really like it because you allow us to write it back. Like we're able to write it back to the database because there's other downstream processes like UCC filing and other things where some of that data is key. So if it does change on the document, you're memorializing that in your loan origination system, which is big. And like I'll say one thing and then move on. But like it's always a big risk when the lenders download the documents, right? Change the binary Word documents and then re-upload and send, right? Because you just lose all that. All that's like captured in a PDF and it's not written anywhere. So using DocuSign, using your loan origination for getting that data actually written to the source is critical because we all regenerate documents. We all need to report on this stuff. So thank you. Well, let's, like it's clear based on your guys' response that like one of the big challenges, roadblocks for automating docs is missing or inaccurate data. So, Jamie, you touched on this a little bit, but like what are what are some of the more common data issues that we have where you as an operations person can't just click a button and have documents generate, or better yet, just have documents generate without any humans clicking a button?
You know, it came to me as we were talking, and Karis was mentioning again their streamlined process is, sometimes you get a Schedule A, for example, or an invoice with 50 different lines on it, that information has to get into the system to get documents generated. And then you have to also be discerning, like what needs to go on the Exhibit A, right, or the Schedule A. So the missing data could be equipment, quantity. Super common would be sales tax application. Depending on the equipment type, or I beg your pardon, the agreement type. Something that's a big pain, it's not a pain, it's an experience, is the signer's real name or the corporate officer's real name, right? Like that's the missing or inaccurate. I would say that's mostly inaccurate, right? If it's Dan versus Daniel, or Jack, but his real name is John, right? So it's those little things that really matter, right? And depending on how the information got into the system, depends on how it gets on the documents.
Yeah.
So
What are some tools that you've used for that? Is there anything that, I guess, for any of the panel, anybody use any tools for verifying, business names, legal names, things like that, personal names?
not through, for me personally, not through automation per se. It's more so checking source documents, or driver's license copies, Secretary of State, pulling in that information. But I love like via DocuSign, where you can actually have it validated in real time, which is amazing.
Yeah, so we have a data verification solution that does look back and look at through different partner solutions, right? That we support different partner solutions. So we can tap into your partner of choice, or we have our own that can validate, like, back to state license agreements, to identity verification, like, hey, this is a valid government issued ID, right? While somebody, and this can happen within the DocuSign envelope during the signing ceremony. And it can also happen more upstream, right? Before you even actually get to the commit stage of that agreement process, you can do that more upstream, right? To ensure that the workflow before you even get to commit is accurate, so you don't have to rework. So we're super excited. And then coming soon, later this year, we're actually building in a risk-based verification. Like, hey, we're entering into an agreement with this party. What does their risk profile look like? So that's a product that's coming out later this year. So we're just we're continuously enhancing our platform to streamline this agreement process, because it's complex and there's a lot of problems.
Yeah. Well, great. I'm excited for that. So I guess Karis, like what have you guys done? I mean, you guys have automated docs now. Like tell us what technology you guys have used to verify this.
Yeah, well, first, Jamie, you brought up a great point when you talk about equipment level details for specific industries, specific types of equipment financing, et cetera, et cetera. When we have initiated this first version of what we're doing, we've focused specifically on advance offering products or working capital type products, which you don't have to be as detailed from an equipment perspective in terms of what that represents. You don't need to have that in any of those particular type of agreements. So when we talk about, an advance, a merchant cash advance program, a working capital program, any of those types of things, you don't have that equipment level detail requirement that's in some of the other document types. So that was a good point. As we look to transition this to, our standard monthly equipment finance product or equipment finance leases, that's certainly going to be a challenge when you talk about, needing to disclose the level of equipment from a detail perspective. So that was definitely a good point. In terms of, where you capture the data, we're trying to keep everything in, our consolidated CRM / front end / application tracking, which is all Nortech Aurora. There are some ancillary data extracts that we're receiving, and we do not do our scoring or our algorithms for our equipment finance products through the Aurora bureau calls directly. Those are done independently, and then the results of those are factored back into the overall CRM at the application level. So some of the things we're using, Experian for validation for credit individual polls. Middesk was mentioned earlier. We use Middesk for business validation, consolidated documents of incorporation, et cetera, notification of incorporation dates. We utilize Dun & Bradstreet to some degree. Those are our major ones. We do utilize Ocrolus for some statement analysis and some processing statement analysis. It's not as sophisticated yet on the processing side, so we don't see as much of the validation of the results as we do see when you're going to utilizing standard bank statements. So those are a lot of our key inputs. And again, the program we also structured right now with where we're embedding directly into a vendor's processing platform. So the concept is when a merchant goes to log in and view their processing activity on their own processing dashboard, they see a little banner or they see a little offer. Hey, you're pre-approved for X dollars in financing if you need it from our business partner, Finova Capital. Click here. And that's what automatically triggers the DocuSign execution, then the preparation of the agreement. So there's, some reliance again on your data validation processes to make sure the data that's being provided is current enough. And then you do need contingencies for what if I don't get a bureau hit? What if I don't get specific results from specific service platforms that are inherently critical to the overall process?
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting. I'm sorry, Christian, I was just gonna say, it's interesting to point to Jamie's point, one of the critical details of equipment level details, at least in this initial version, we've taken that out of the equation. So
yeah. Well, let's unpack that a bit because that is a challenge, right? Because I mean, it's
Right.
not uncommon, right? To like app comes in and it says a couple bulldozers for 120K, go approve that. And you might approve it, right? You might pull the PG credit and the company credit and run through a scorecard, and that might get approved, but you're not gonna be able to generate docs with that. So David, what's your point of view? I mean, you've seen this multiple times, as director of product here at Nortech. Like what's your take on how do you get lenders out of the picture when you do need that equipment details?
Yeah, it's definitely possible to create self-serve experience for borrowers or vendors to put that information themselves. So they're not reliant on the back and forth of emailing an invoice over and updating whatever information needs to go into that Schedule A. And you can create the validation processes and data controlled around the doc request form so that you can be confident as a lender that when this information was inputted, it meets their business rules and the information is accurate and validated. And then you can obviously plug that information into other data providers like T-Value or Middesk or any others that were mentioned here to gain a further level of confidence to move the process forward.
Right. Yeah, and I think like, we have some captive clients, and fortunately for captives, it's a little bit easier, right? Because you can build in equipment catalogs and things like that. But when you can really originate any piece of equipment from any industry, that's a real problem. So, well, hey, like getting the accurate data, verifying it, such an important part. Any other thoughts on this topic before we move on to the next one? Okay. Well, let's talk about, unpack some of the stuff that like Jamie mentioned as far as like knowing who's signing. For some reason that's really important. So Jamie, why can you like for those of us that aren't as familiar with like why like getting that stuff named like Joe versus Joseph, like why is that so important from a business standpoint to just get these names correct?
So because because that's the way mom told us. So I'll tell you from just my experience working with for default remedies. I'll go with that first. Is it would be super reasonable, I think, right? If I'm signing a document with a university and their procurement manager signs the document and says, I'm authorized to get 100 copiers for the university. I'm procurement manager. That to me sounds, well, that's reasonable.
Hmm.
Well, to me, it doesn't sound reasonable, but to somebody else, it might sound reasonable, right? And so they accept the documents as signed, everything's delivered, you go in to get paid, and you can't because this procurement guy, one, he's no longer there. The copiers are now someplace else because he really wasn't authorized to sign. And, or he is still there, but he wasn't authorized. And we never verified it. We just trusted, well, he's procurement manager. That's reasonable. So what's reasonable to one person isn't necessarily reasonable to somebody else, especially the organization that's responsible for repaying the debt, right? So that's why it's important. It's also important when, if you're a public company and your policies and procedures say we verify who's signing the documents and the name is wrong or you didn't verify, right? So it's important to do what you say you're going to do every single time you do it because you're making a promise that these are the things that we do. So I think the most important is from a default remedy standpoint. We can sign documents, we can deliver equipment. Hopefully everybody pays and we're all good. But when they don't, your documentation better be as tight and right as it can be. Otherwise, good luck pursuing default remedies. I know that's so negative, but it's so true.
No, that's great. So Ginger, from a DocuSign standpoint, I mean, I guess there's multiple things to this or components to this, but like how do you know who's signing? Like how does a lender ensure that the person's the real person and address some of those challenges Jamie was talking about?
Yeah, that's DocuSign at its core, right? It's being able to validate identity of who's signing the envelope, right? And also the audit history around every piece of like who did it go to, who signed it. You can turn on geolocations, seeing where they signed it, what approval process that it went through, right, before we even got to the signer. Yeah, I just want to call out about DocuSign's open APIs. We have over 600 partners that have integrations into DocuSign. So we can, if it's attached to like a procurement system, where there's like workflows within the procurement system, who has signing authority before it even comes to DocuSign. That's an integration that we support. And then once it's sent out, right? So we have different levels of authentication on even the signer, from like a simple form of authentication, such as an SMS text message with an access code, or knowledge-based authentication questions on who's agreeing to sign this, up to, do you have a valid form of a government ID, taking a picture of that, including liveness in that. And then to the highest level form of authentication, which is, bringing a notary service remotely into that session. So that's, a live in session remotely notary session with a valid notary. So,
That's so cool.
DocuSign supports, DocuSign supports, whatever the customer wants to do as far as, hey, how do I engage my customer base in a frictionless way possible? Kahir's made a comment earlier about, not overburdening the system or the workflow or the processes, right? Because you also don't want to make it too difficult to transact. So depending upon what the use case is, what type of transaction that you're performing, you have options that you can build into your engagement process to get the documents signed and have all of the compliance documentation behind it in a secure way for any kind of audit or compliance purposes. But you don't want systems to also impact you from getting business done either.
Yeah, great point. Also important, we in our industry, there's so much, people do a lot of trading, a lot of deals, syndications, securitizations, right? Like the chattel paper going from one lender to the other. So having all that information is key. So Karis, like, can you talk a little bit about like how you balance, that like being careful and security with that end user experience that you talked about before? How do you find that balance there?
Sure. Well, I know a couple of the things that we've done. First was, we utilized the combined functionality through the integration that we have available with DocuSign already today that provides a secure URL that we send back for that initial presentation in an initial partner portal once the user has decided they're interested in the offering that's out there under that particular environment. But there is a time limit on that particular URL. Has to be executed within, I believe it's either 30 minutes or an hour. Otherwise, that URL goes inactive and invalid. So one of the challenges that we've run into with the particular implementation was, the original thought process was speed, getting an offer in front of the user when the user needs the funds, when the user is interested in acting on the opportunity to procure the funds, and getting that document in front of them as quickly as possible to execute. One of the challenges we've seen is that they don't always execute immediately, even with all of that upfront process. There still becomes an element of negotiation or reviewing the details, and then let me talk to somebody and see if I can strike another deal. So, that balance is going to exist. But what you want to do is at least maximize the user experience part of it by giving them the opportunities, giving them the details, having access to it immediately. And then if on their election, they either choose not to sign immediately or they've opened it but not fully gone through the process based on DocuSign's packaging and the status packaging associated with that, we can trigger follow-up methods to reach that particular merchant or that particular user and talk to them about, okay, what did you not like about the offer? Or we saw you open the offer, but you didn't fully execute it. Is there something else that you need to get a little more clarity on? Is there something you don't understand? And if in that process we can resend, an updated document package and an updated URL that will eliminate that initial need. But we still find in a lot of cases when you get that initial presentation of an agreement, it's almost like, wow, these guys are serious. This is an agreement right in front of me.
Yeah, exactly. It might scare them away, right?
You don't always get 100% execution on that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great, great
Yeah.
real world experience to share with the participants. I mean, I can concur. I think being close to your solution to other clients, I think there's a level of trust that needs to be built before you throw a contract in front of somebody, right? Like if you just go right from, hey, finance this at this amount, and then throw them a contract, you're kind of skipping a step of like, hey, this is what you're getting, trust us, et cetera, et cetera. The other thing too is like I agree. The feature you talked about as far as seeing like I think it's so cool. I know David, like within Aurora, like you can go in, you can see that like if there's three signers, that two of them signed and one of them didn't, and you can actually set up automatic workflows to like go like if they don't sign and two out of three did, you can create custom workflows to shoot them a text or shoot them an email to kind of nudge them towards that signing. So that's cool. So, all right. So, great discussion. We're going to move on to the next topic in that. Um, so, okay, we go to clients and sometimes we'll show up and they're like, well, how many document templates they have? And they're like 400. You're like, what? 400, like, how could you possibly have 400 templates? And they're like, oh yeah, every time, we go to a new state and they need a new paragraph for this equipment or this product type, it's a Cartesian product. It just like, it grows and grows, right? And so it's really difficult. And then hence that expert that you needed to know what templates to bring in. So David, from a technology standpoint, talk to me about like how do you make your documents dynamic and rule based so you don't end up in that situation where you're dealing with 400 templates?
Yeah, so I recommend starting backwards from probably your most used contract, like an EFA or something like that. Because that lets you codify the rules to create, what's hopefully going to drive most of your deals. And by rules, it's, like let's say that you're doing a deal in California, you need to know to populate the California disclosure. You need to know that got to capture the state as California. The transaction's less than $500,000. The lease type is an EFA and not an FFV. And then from there, you can identify where in your system you're going to pull that information from. And then lastly, where you're going to get it at the outset. So is that information is going to be collected in the application? How is that going to be validated along the way through whatever data providers you're going to use to pull credit or do fraud, so that by the time you're ready to generate docs, you have this full set of business logic, the data in place so that you can be confident that when you push the button, it's going to work. Then over time, what hopefully happens is, and what I'm sure the others will talk about is instead of making 400 templates, you're going in and you're modifying a paragraph at a time to say, okay, this is the title deal, insert this language and take this language out, but you still have that one template that you're just subbing little bits of language in and out of based on the business rules within your system.
Yeah. Yeah. So you had a couple really good nuggets there, and I want to just paraphrase them. One is don't boil the ocean, right? Like start with a simple product like an EFA and maybe a non-disclosure required stage or something. And I like your concept of working backwards, like thinking about what needs to be captured and then like what are the processes to eventually get there, working your way all the way to the credit application. I think that's a very smart, methodical approach to tackle this, where if you can get like one stream of business fully automated, then you can start adding to it, which is the second point I think you said, which is really important. And that's a tool that will give you that dynamic behavior, right? Like, yeah, you could certainly merge documents, But if you don't have a tool that's going to be very dynamic and allowing you to do that, you're going to end up with a lot of templates, which is going to make it more difficult. So great feedback. So Jamie, what's your thoughts on all that? Like, we started, I probably talked outside of my expertise area but you're the expert in process. What have you seen as far as like best practices for trying to get this stuff automated?
Well, okay, I want to go back to just one, don't boil the ocean. I've never heard that before, and I wrote it down and I'm going to use it. So thank you.
You're welcome.
So so my experience has been mostly we don't have all of our documents in one place to be able to say, here's a standard set of documents, right? Or I'm trying to think of a clean way to say that their documents have been changed. So there's not one real good original source document to go from. And then having documented policies and processes, right? To make sure that, okay, this is our process every time on this type of a transaction, whether it be an EFA title transaction, wherever it may be, right? It's making sure that you've got the documented processes down or policies down, right? And then you move into the processes and the protocols. But if they're all if they're not all documented, it's hard to even get the ball rolling, right? So I don't know if I totally segued the conversation, but that's just my experience has been to get it started. You don't want to boil the ocean. You need to start small, but you have to have the policies written down and not just, well, we would do it this way or this way. When it's not clear, it's like, how do you discern it, right?
Yeah, so important. I think us on the technology side just want to roll up our sleeves and start configuring all this. And you're like, hold on,
right.
let's get this stuff documented. Let's get these processes in place. So that's great. So Karis, like, from like a lender standpoint, you've got disclosures, things like that. What any best practices around automation and dynamic data?
Yeah, we've utilized kind of the metadata configuration inherent to Salesforce with the overall product that you offer to isolate specific templates and isolate pre-merged templates that cover the different, at least state disclosure scenarios, of which there are a handful that we've accounted for as, an addition or an additional set of data on a template that's required for ultimate inclusion in the packaging that goes to a vendor to be able to present. We did go down the route of trying to utilize a specific merge document package, but we found there was a latency issue there where we did add some overall time to the experience from the standpoint of getting the data to the vendor, and when the vendor received the data and was able to activate the URL and put the agreement in front of the merchant or user, we saw an increase in latency trying to take that approach. So that's going to be trial and error depending on the nature of what level of detail you're trying to include from a data perspective, how many templates are ultimately looking to have to be merged into creating a specific final document package or document configuration, because you'd also don't, from a user experience perspective, the latency is one thing, but you also don't want to send them 10 separate links to 10 separate parts of agreements and asking them to review and sign 10 different times. So you've got to balance all of that with how you look at it from a configuration perspective. And I think David's recommendation is to start at the highest level of baseline agreement makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. So, all right, Ginger, you heard all our dirty laundry here in the equipment finance industry. Are we doomed, or there's some tools out there that can help us?
Oh no, y'all are doing fantastic. And it's like it goes back to my days where I was more in the consulting realm, like the people, process, technology, and how they all intersect, right?
Uh-huh.
So you have Jamie talking about process, how important it is. It's super important, right? And then how Finova has taken those processes and, streamlined them and trying to get the data latency out of their process, right? And it's constantly tweaking, right? It's constantly tweaking.
Mhm.
And then there's always the people element, but like DocuSign has solutions, right, that can bridge that gap anywhere from, document generation tools, through our Maestro workflow solution. You talk about templates. I think everybody here is pretty familiar with the DocuSign templates and how that library can get very big and broad very quickly, but we have solutions now where you can do a data capture element to be able to, put that into a workflow to actually choose the right template, right?
Mhm.
So making it easier to determine which direction that applicant can go to make sure that they're getting the right documentation. And then on the higher end, like as you scale up to more complex lending documents, we have a whole contract lifecycle management solution that has template libraries and where you can pull and extract different template clauses to populate your agreement. Also has redlining capabilities
Mhm.
as well built into that solution. So that's where our DocuSign sales organization, they're very well versed in the solutions that DocuSign has, and they're the experts. They can listen to where are your pain points, where are there inefficiencies, what business problems are you trying to solve, and understand where DocuSign solutions can fit that issue. And then we also have partners, right? We have partners that integrate into DocuSign. So that we're not gonna boil the ocean. We can't do everything, right? But we can connect the different systems together to really streamline the agreement workflow process and building as much automation into the process as humanly possible.
Yes. There's so much to unpack in what you said, like the contract lifecycle management, and we see that in our industry too with larger deals where that's needed and being able to automate red lines. And it's so cool where your technology is enabling us to go. Okay, so we're just down to about 5 minutes. I'm gonna open it up for audience questions. If you've got questions, go ahead and let us know, and we'll take them as they come in. But this this wouldn't be a technology discussion if we didn't use that two-letter acronym AI, right? Like it's not official unless we do that. So have to get your thoughts on what sort of role AI has in document automation. I'll just open it up to the group. Does anybody have any opinions on this as a technology and what we need to do from a doc automation standpoint to position ourselves well for this coming wave?
I'll go first. Oh.
Oh, great. I was going to share what DocuSign is doing, but I would love the Jamie from the business process side.
Just from a process standpoint side, okay, the ability to utilize AI to ask a question and it come in to your system of record, that it's the same question asked every single time. So the order of the questions are consistent. And then when the information gets pulled in automatically without somebody having to do the manual search, and then to be able to have the information brought right to you, where it used to take a person 40 minutes to consolidate a history of a customer. It just, that to me is super, super, super exciting. I can't even, like, you don't have to be a total FBI agent anymore. You still have to be discerning, but
Yeah.
the access to information is wicked. It's so fast.
Yeah, it's amazing. Ginger, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. So, if you're not investing in AI, or looking at AI as in building that into your solution within technology, then that's a challenge, right? You probably won't be in business 10 years from now. So DocuSign is heavily investing smartly in AI technology, because if you think about it, DocuSign, 1.6 million customers, over 1 billion users of DocuSign. That's a lot of agreement data that's out there, right? It's huge.
Mhm.
And our customers, they want to know what's in the agreements that they've executed on, right? So it's one of our top requests is our customers really want to understand, what's within their agreement repository. What have I signed in the past? What are the risk elements to it? And so that's where DocuSign is building AI into our solution. And then, just making sure that and we're doing it in a very practical way, making sure it's anonymized, that we're doing aggregated data searches, right? That it's all encrypted, right? So we focus heavily on the securitization and the trust of our platform. So we want AI to be used responsibly within our platform. But, we see it as a huge need going forward within our customer base.
Yeah. Well, it's neat to see you understanding kind of your unique overlap with it, with the contracts, and trying how to utilize the new technology and provide additional value. So David, what's your thoughts? I mean, what can lenders do now to kind of lay down this foundation so they're ready to take advantage of some of the things like that Jamie and Ginger were talking about?
Yeah, I think it's going to be super important to have well cataloged data within your origination system and having structure around that data. So, I mean, you're going to face the same garbage in, garbage out problem with a new LLM that you are with a traditional reporting or analytics model that you build. There's not really any changes there. I think thinking about where AI can be really impactful is going to be important. So how do you want to interact with your customers? So you're basically enabling the ability to have an expert in your loan origination process to help a customer make decisions about terms or explain documentation that used to be something that was done by a human that could now be done by a chatbot, versus the things that are going to be the same every single time and are highly automated today. There's probably less value for AI there.
Yeah. Karis, it kind of makes me think about like that trust component you were talking about earlier, like if there's a way you mentioned like, hey, they might want to talk to somebody, about before signing the contract. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, and I think there's two areas we would probably want to reach out. And Ginger, we may be talking to you right after this to get some more detail around capabilities. But the two areas that we've seen in just analyzing some of the baseline data that we've recently started with when we implemented our program. Number one, we have a high level of people opening and attempting to execute and review offers on weekends, which we hadn't originally thought that was going to be something that we would see a lot more of. And then second is trying to analyze the actual industry types or get quick data on the nature of or the business that's actually being, looking for funding at specific points in time. So
Yeah.
those are two data points that we ultimately would want to leverage AI modeling, AI analytics to be able to intertwine those data sets and then allow us to do some workflow actions out of what we've seen based on an experience that was something that we hadn't really anticipated when we originally launched.
Awesome. Well, hey guys, on that note, we're at time. So, Ginger, Jamie, Karis, David, thank you all so much for your very valuable input, and you all have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks for hosting,
Thank
Christian.
you.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
Thanks for the invite.